Hi everyone, this is Karen Fomafung, your Agile Evangelist. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be analyzing the Scrum Guide, that is making a comparison between the 2017 version of the Scrum Guide and the November 2020 recently released version of the Scrum Guide. So by the end of this video, what you will achieve from it is you will be able to have a complete understanding or clarity on what the founders of Scrum considers as highly important for an organization or a Scrum team to succeed in the practice of Scrum. Now, if this is your first time here, please go ahead, click that subscription button, turn on the notification bell so that you will not miss out on any new video on this platform. Also, go ahead and like, share with your friends so we all can continue to learn and grow as this one big happy Agile family. Thank you so much. So now, what are the changes that have been made between the old version of the Scrum Guide and the newer version of the Scrum Guide? So I have succeeded in identifying close to 24 changes that have been made. The first one that I noticed is there's been a change in terminology from using the word development team within the Scrum team. You know, the Scrum team is made up of the Scrum Master, the PO, and right now is the developers. But before, it used to be the Scrum Master, the PO, and the development team. But right now, the development team have been removed or replaced with developers. And just because I was fortunate enough to attend the launching of the new Scrum Guide that was hosted by Dr. Jeff Sutherland, who is one of the founders of Scrum, he explained that this change was made because we don't want to encourage the existence of a sub-team within a team, you know. So the term development team seems like it's encouraging the existence of sub-team or subgroups within the Scrum team. So that's why right now the term has been replaced with developers. That means either so there is a Scrum Master, there is a PO, and then everyone else that is contributing to the development of that product, be it the administrative assistant, be it the systems administrator, whoever that person may be, a tester, you know, business analyst, they are all categorized under developers. So I hope that's clear. That's the first change that I noticed. The second change that I noticed is the replacement of the term self-organizing to now favor self-managing. So in the 2017 version, there was the term self-organizing because they expected the Scrum team to become highly performing when they get to a point of start being able to organize themselves and complete their work. But in this 2020 version, the Scrum team is not only expected to become self-organizing, they're expected to move from being self-organizing to being self-managed. That means they own the process, they own the work, they're accountable for it. You see, the third change that I noticed was the change of the term role to now favor accountability. So if you check the newer Scrum guide, you will not find the term role in there. I mean, I'm talking about the various Scrum roles within the Scrum team. It's now been replaced with accountability, meaning that the members of the Scrum team are expected to be accountable for the outcome of the sprint. Not the developers being accountable, not the Scrum Master being accountable, not only the PO, but the entire Scrum team is expected to be accountable for the outcome of that sprint. That's the other change that I noticed. And then one other change that I noticed was the replacement of the term servant leadership to now favor true leadership. Meaning that if we are rooted in these Scrum values, it will automatically reflect through our true leadership. That's what that means. I'm not sure if I explained that correctly. If you have questions around that, please just let me know. Change number 4. So the previous version of the Scrum Guide recommended 3 to 9 team members for an appropriate Scrum team size. But this newer version has recommended 10 or fewer team members for an appropriate team size. Change number 5. This change number 5, to me, I think it's really interesting, because in the previous version, the responsibilities of a Scrum team was limited around the Scrum team producing increments that meet the definition of done. But this newer version of the Scrum Guide actually clarifies that the responsibility of the Scrum team doesn't only end at the level of creating an increment that meets the definition of done. It goes right through creating an increment that delivers value to the customers. So the Scrum team is accountable or responsible for delivering increments every sprint that will potentially add value or deliver value to the end users, that's the customers, not just limiting themselves at business level, but moving to the level of the customers. So I thought this was really interesting. Change number 6. In the previous version of the Scrum Guide, the Scrum Master was accountable for the establishment of Scrum within the team. But in this newer 2020 version of the Scrum Guide, the Scrum Master is accountable for the establishment of Scrum and the effectiveness of Scrum. Meaning that the Scrum Master wouldn't just come in and preach Scrum and end at that level. No. The Scrum Master is also accountable for the effectiveness of Scrum within that organization. The other change that I noticed is that in the previous Scrum Guide, only the daily stand-up was recommended to have a consistent schedule that is being held at the same time, at the same place, on daily basis. But in this newer version of the Scrum Guide, the recommendation is to establish a standard schedule for all other Scrum events. That is including the sprint review, the sprint retrospective, the sprint planning, and all other events that will help to realize a valuable increment at the end of the sprint. Another change that I noticed is that in the older version of the Scrum Guide, the sprint planning was expected to have the development team. But in this newer version of the Scrum Guide, the sprint planning is expected to be attended by the entire Scrum team, that is, including the developers, the Scrum Master, and the product owner. The other change that I noticed is that in the previous version, the topics for discussion during the sprint planning was the what and the how. So what is to be done and how should it be done? But in this newer version of the Scrum Guide, we have the topics of discussion during the sprint planning as the what, the how, and the why. Meaning that right now, they want to make sure that the entire Scrum team ties their work to the purpose. That is understanding why they are doing what they are doing. You know, that's another way of making sure that the team stays motivated. That is understanding how what you are doing is affecting or impacting the users. You know, it increases motivation. So that's the reason for that change. All right, another change is that in the old version of the Scrum Guide, it states that the PO is responsible in inviting stakeholders to the sprint review meetings. But the newer version of the Scrum Guide doesn't state who is responsible in inviting stakeholders to the sprint review meeting. Another change that has been made is that in the older version of the Scrum Guide, it is not specified whether after the daily stand-up, the Scrum team still has to meet in whatever form or shape. But the newer version of the Scrum Guide clearly states that after the daily stand-up, the Scrum team can meet throughout the day as needed, as required. So if they need to keep having communication and conversation among themselves, they should keep doing that. Another change that I noticed is that in the older version of the Scrum Guide, regarding the sprint review event steps, the product owner was responsible in presenting the sprint backlog, that is explaining to the stakeholders what was done and what was not done. And then the development team was responsible in demonstrating, that's demoing the done increments. And together they determine next steps. But in this newer version of the Scrum Guide, it doesn't state whether the product owner is responsible in presenting done and not done increments. It only says that the Scrum team is responsible in demonstrating the work, and then collaboration has to take place between the entire team to determine next steps. That's what the newer version of the Scrum Guide states. Another change that I noticed is that as far as retrospective is concerned, the older version of the Scrum Guide states that at the end of every retrospective, the new sprint backlog should contain at least one item for improvement. But this newer version of the Scrum Guide doesn't specify one item for improvement. It says that at the end of every retrospective, the new sprint backlog should contain items for improvement, meaning that it may have more than just one item for improvement based on the team's capability of conducting that improvement. The other change that I noticed is that in the older version of the Scrum Guide, it states that the sprint backlog should contain items to be worked on and the various information that is necessary for that item to be completed and meet the definition of done, meaning that it clearly talked about the what, which are the items, and the how, all the information, details that is necessary to complete our work. But this newer version of the Scrum Guide states that the sprint backlog item should contain the sprint goal, that is the why. It should contain the various stories, that is the what, and it should also contain the details, all the necessary information describing how the team should do that work. That's the how part of it. I know I'd already mentioned that above, but at sprint backlog level, that is the breakdown. The other change that I noticed is that regarding refinement, in the older version of the Scrum Guide, it states that backlog refinement should not be more than 10% of the team's development time. But this newer version of the Scrum Guide states that backlog refinement should be conducted as needed. That means it's based on the team to determine how much refinement they need, and that's how they're going to implement that refinement. The other exciting change that I noticed is that, in the previous version, the team commitment only ends at the team level, that is at the level of the sprint goal. The team was only committed to the sprint goal. But the newer version of the Scrum Guide now not only have the sprint goal, it also has the product goal. That's the big picture. So whatever shippable increments or valuable increments that the Scrum team is working on to meet the sprint goal, they should also have the big picture in mind, which is the product goal, the overall product goal, meaning that at the end of their development of all these increments, it should fit in. They are also accountable in ensuring that it fits into the big picture. That is the entire product goal. To me, that's very important, because just letting the team focus only on the sprint goal, to me, I thought this has been some kind of disconnection That's why you find some teams not able to connect to the purpose, the vision of the work, whatever work they're doing, just because they are focused only at team level. But now, stating and clarifying that the team is also responsible for the product goal that helps them to connect to the purpose. And to me, that's a form of increasing the motivation of the team. Another interesting change that I noticed is at the level of artifact commitment. In the older version of the Scrum Guide, the team was only committed to the sprint goal, that is the sprint backlog. They were also committed to the PI goal, that is the definition of done. But in this newer version of the Scrum Guide, the Scrum team is committed to the product goal, the sprint goal at the level of the sprint backlog, and the PI goal at the level of the definition of done. I hope you get that. The other change that I noticed is that at the level of the number of increments that are expected to be delivered during the sprint, in the older version, it is not specified. It is not clear at all the number of increments that is expected to be delivered at the end of the sprint. But in this 2020 version of the Scrum Guide, the Scrum team is responsible or accountable to deliver at least one or more increments at the end of each sprint. So that's how you determine that the team is adding value to the business and to their customers. Other change again that I noticed is that regarding when shippable increments can be released, in the older version of the Scrum Guide, it's not clear. It's not clearly stated whether release is allowed to be made before the sprint review. But in this newer version, the 2020 version of the Scrum Guide, it is clearly allowed that release can happen even before the sprint review. So to me, based on my own analysis, I thought that was contradictory, because I think the reason why sprint reviews even happen is for these feedback loops, so that we are making sure that we are catching any inconsistency as far as definition of done is concerned, and we are fixing them and adapting. But this newer version of the Scrum Guide states that the release can be made even before the sprint review happens. So that's their take. Another really interesting change that I also noticed is that in the older version of the Scrum Guide, it states that at the end of the sprint, the team should have potentially releasable increments or potentially shippable increments. But this newer version of the Scrum Guide, since the team is now accountable not only for the sprint goal, not only to deliver shippable increments, they are now responsible in ensuring that the increment they are delivering is adding value, is delivering, that is having a value-driven agenda. Now, in this new version of the Scrum Guide, it states that at the end of the sprint, the team should have potentially releasable, valuable, usable increments. So the word valuable and usable has been added to releasable. So the expectation has been increased to 3 as opposed to 1, which was just releasable increment. I hope you get that. The last but not the least change that I noticed is that in the older version of the Scrum Guide, it says that the definition of done should be defined by the development team. But this newer version of the Scrum Guide states that the definition of done should be defined by the Scrum team, meaning that everyone in the Scrum team, including the Scrum Master, should be part of defining that definition of done. So that is all I was able to pick up from comparing the old Scrum Guide and the new Scrum Guide. I hope you got something from it. Please, again, if you are new to this channel, please go ahead and turn on that subscription button, turn on the notification bell so that you will stay on top of my weekly uploads, and like and share if you appreciate the content. Also, in our next video, we will be talking about Azure DevOps or Jira, and just do a walkthrough on my role that I play as a Scrum Master in the use of this tool. That is talking about capacity, velocity, dashboard, what exactly I focus on when I am carrying out my role as a Scrum Master during the sprints. So thank you so much again for watching this piece. I hope you gained something from it. Please let me know in the comment section below your take, and if you've also noticed any change between the old Scrum Guide and the new Scrum Guide, please drop it in the comment section so that I can also learn something. Thank you so much, and hope to talk to you soon. Bye.